Welcome, ladies and gents. It is an absolute pleasure to be here recapping the central story for Story Arc 6 now. We're well along the road here. We're into the second half of our season, and most importantly, we've just introduced all of the P&D characters that wanted to join our story. And it was awesome. It was thrilling to see the characters that they came up with. Remember, this format is kind of built for a wide variety of people and world builders, and the more brains we get in there, the more variety we get in the races and backstories and powers. And it came together really, really well in both parts 1 and 2, which will be recapped right here in a second. Unfortunately, I am traveling at the moment. I'm in Connecticut with my parents. I'm doing a wedding here tomorrow, which is why I'm not drinking whiskey, and instead I'm hydrating, getting ready for the events that are to come, getting my liver prepped. It was also a pretty rough weekend. We had Mead come and visit me in person. He wanted to do this recap with me, but unfortunately he had to go back to work. So I am I'm doing this one lone style. But let's get right into it and keep this as concise as possible. I do have a keynote slide set for you, so we'll go right into the beginning of part 1, which started with Wolf, Sneck, Brack, and Dell. And this was kind of the powerhouse swordsman group of both Latchards and Cotheins, and they have now transitioned through Atroprog. They had to split up with Letharain and Paul, and they were really left out to dry in the deserts of Atroprog. And we joined them at this kind of seeming end of their venture, where they have literally no resources. They've headed in the wrong direction towards the Uala Forest, but they are met by Wolf Khan Nin at kind of the steps of these of the forests. And the Khan Nin are this subset species of Atrans that didn't acclimate with society and civilization as well as the rest of the Atrans, and have stayed in the Uala Forest and have this interesting connection to nature. Wolf Khan Nin has an extremely close connection to nature because he sends out this pack of feral jackals that surrounds the group and seems to command them with this horn, which is part of his skill set if you go and check out his character page. So they're surrounded by the jackals, and for the first time ever, we see we see Dell just give in. He drops to his knees, unclips his belt, and says, "We've been through so much." He was tired. They haven't eaten for days. They don't have water, and he is about to give up. Brack tries to get him back up to his feet. Just doesn't happen. And then we see that the jackals are not feral, and they're actually tamed by Wolf Khan Nin, who calls them back away and starts to talk to Brack at the head of the group. So Brack tells them of their conditions. They're trying to get to Haydos. Wolf doesn't really want to get involved. He knows they're from the Rift. He knows that these are kind of government-handled issues and wants nothing to do with the Atran government, but he does agree to at least get Brack and Dell on this sand sled attached to these jackals and over to Haydos. And behind them, Reich follows as well, so the Pike Drake is with them. So they arrive at Haydos, and the group runs into Master Sneck, who is a Vermint's character, our first one ever. Really cool guy, kind of reminds me of, Master something from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. My brain is failing me right now. But yeah, kind of had a similar vibe. He's kind of this shady character who runs the underground trade system, the UTI. Love it. Love the abbreviations. And he informs them that Haydos is locked down for what the military is declaring as an outbreak of a serious infection or illness throughout Haydos. And everyone is packed in up to this moat bridge at the front of Haydos, and the guards aren't allowing anyone through. The sun is setting, and they're locking up the city for the night, so they start bringing back the drawbridge. And Wolf, again, uses his connection to Atran's nature to call in a pack of archangels, which are these huge, huge birds that kind of swoop in after this rotted seafood that Wolf had called them in and scattered over the guards, and it creates this absolute chaos. And the group is able to escape. But it's a good demonstration of Wolf's abilities. And then we have Sneck, on the other hand, who is extremely agile and crosses the bridge and is left knowingly as kind of a more mysterious character, because we're not exactly sure how he's going to fit into this group of master swordsmen. And now Wolf, breaking into the city himself, is kind of stuck with this group. But at the end, the biggest kind of plot point for this group so far is that they've gotten into the city, and all the Atron males of the city are missing. It's only the females and children. And so they are left curious what is actually going on. It doesn't look like all these people are infected, but as the military claimed, they're supposed to be. So the outcomes, Wolf made 2 great saves there. Sneck is now on board with the group, and they're kind of investigating Hados, and this was the destination, remember, for Brack and Dell, where they wanted to contact the Atron government and get their army over to the Rift, who's been missing, to try to settle what's been going on and aid them and aid the disaster that has fallen upon Latch just before the Trivium binding. So now, they get there and they have these intentions, and something more mysterious and ominous it has taken over the city. So keep that in mind for 7. We're going to go to our next characters, Fraldum and Aiden. This was a huge left turn in the story of Fraldum and Aiden. It was a lot of fun to write because these characters have shown some of the most development over the story. These guys are kind of day 1 or day 2ers. I think they might have started in arc 2. Anyway, they had they'd been left on a cliffhanger from the last story arc of Lesserin, who is kind of the right hand of the Concluent, throwing their friend Fluera off a building because they were somewhat careless with their investigation. The people of Kybright, word had gotten out that they were there to investigate the council, in the Concluent, the Atron device, the missing bishop, and for the first time, Lesserin faces them and pretty much threatens them to leave the city, but also gives them a heads up, like, because they are being threatened so much, they must be on the right track. So without thinking, Fraldum shows a side that we haven't seen yet. He's not, again, he's from the college, and he's not used to the violence of Cothein, and so he's taken back by Fluera being thrown from the building. He takes her into the tavern, becomes extremely hostile to everyone, including Aiden. Immediately resorts to Nightshade, which he is very, very weary of using usually, and just kind of dumps it in her mouth and forces the medicine down to save her. Aiden, he then talks to Aiden, and this was a very, very different type of interaction than we've seen with Fraldum and Aiden before, right? Because Aiden is young, but he's outgoing, where Fraldum is not great with people, and Fraldum is just besides himself with Fluera's near-death experience. And he flips out on Aiden, and he knows, basically, it all comes back to Professor Specht, because she was the only one that kind of knew of Aiden, knew of the investigation, knew of Fraldum's plans, so they immediately speculate of Specht, weird, that wasn't planned, that that she is behind this and ratted them out to whoever Lesserin was. So Aiden obviously kind of wants nothing to do with it, and Fraldum rallies him and pretty much insults him and says, you were sent here by your family to be the man of the household, and now we're presented the opportunity, follow through with this investigation. And he doesn't give him the details on purpose, but he insinuates that he wants Aiden to go there, and he knows he has conjuration magic, and he wants Aiden to intimidate Specht and finally get some hard answers for their investigation that hasn't had much to show yet. So Aiden goes over there, very angry from Fraldum's insults. He was rallied up and walked in there and not only confronted Spect, but confronted that mysterious Atron that she kind of had hid away in her attic. And he attacks both of them, and the old Atron finally spills a little bit about himself, that he was a prior prophesized concluent that didn't work out, and he couldn't get the job done. But since then, another concluent has risen, and he has many more vices than the old Atron did, but they're vices that allow him to follow through on what the plans for the concluent were. In addition to that, he specifies that the Atron device is actually called the Pyre, and it's a device that was made to we don't have all the details yet, so I'm going to be a little bit ambiguous here on purpose, but the Atron states that it's a device used to help Latch and Cothein catch up to Atroprog in their technology advancements, because when the rifts first opened, Atroprog was already ahead. They tried to catch up Latch, which just didn't have the means as a society to take on all this technology at once. And Cothein, it was still struggling, and they had this kind of fallen out mechanical revolution that's currently going on. And so the concluent was supposed to come and solve that problem, but we're not sure exactly how he plans to solve it or what the Pyre is supposed to do. It kind of reminds me of like the U.S. involvement in the Middle East, right? We came in there, we tried to introduce a more stable form of government, and the whole thing ended up collapsing. That's kind of what happened with Atroprog, venturing into Cothein and Latch and creating peace there, but at the same time causing some sort of a fallout in both worlds. So the outcomes here, Fluera is stable, but she's paralyzed from the neck down. She took a huge fall, but the Nightshade does save her, and they now know of the concluent, a little bit about the plans, and a little bit about the Pyre. But remember, you guys have been threatened by Lesserin, who has a decent amount of power in Kybright, to leave the city or else. So keep that in mind as you plan what to do next. All right, next. New character, nice. All right, Baron von Machina. Really fun character. Has a very, very interesting take on Latchard technology. This guy is miles ahead in technology than really not only Latch but Cothein as well, up to the Atron standard, because most of his skills revolve around a machine that you can go look up the details, but a machine that's kind of powered by this reactor, and he carries around a magnet on his belt that the machine follows, and they kind of work out as quite a team. So Baron von Machina has been underground in the underground city of Dillas, hope I'm pronouncing that right, under the Latchard surface for years and years. He knew that the military had gone off to investigate the rift and has since disappeared. The people of Dillas are tired of waiting for this military to return, and when Baron von Machina surfaces, this is kind of offset from our regular timeline, but when he surfaces, he actually sees Ames escaping with Rosio, and the Latchard army's backs as the Bloodhux is flying over towards Morace. So we have gone maybe about a week back in the timeline to make this story work, but actually Ames, Nico, and Rosio are a week behind in the timeline. I'll field questions about that on the Discord, but it's all gonna come together, and it's only a couple days separation, because we know, although we see the Latchard army going to Morace from the Rift, we know that Morace has actually already fallen, and Meade and Bulric are coming up, and they've already left the city. But so he sees Ames escaping with Rosio off to the west of the Trivium Binding through the Latchard Rift, and he says, screw this, I've been underground for years now, it's time to go out and venture. So he hops on the back of on the back of Gregor, or Greg, his machine buddy, and heads off to tail Rosio's group. All right, now we have Bulric, Sir Mead, and Alver. This part of the story opens with Sir Mead dragging in Bulric, still by his feet, behind a horse, all the way to Aramin. So, despite the day's travel or whatever it is to Aramin, Sir Mead decided not to really help him out and just kind of dragged him in as kind of a trophy to try and show off to the people of Aramin. But because Bulric is such a character and pretty much a celebrity around Cothein, they all go and immediately cater to him as he's tied up to the back of this horse and cater to his needs. Sir Mead, again, is just overlooked and somewhat frustrated, so the citizens end up taking them both over to Alver, who has this unofficial reign over the city as he's stepped up as a leader and says it is time to fight. Although the Cothein military might not be helping, I'm going to put something together to fight what we have. And he's a good leader for this because his background was kind of as a mercenary traveling all of Cothein on contracts. So he has a lot of contacts that he's now called upon to put this force together. So they head in, they meet him, and then Alver summons this guy, this doctor named Merc Mantis. And he is kind of a mix of a witch doctor and a Dr. Frankenstein, but he was renowned at the fighting pits for keeping people and slaves alive past what they should have lived through after whatever injuries they got in the fighting pits. So Bulric awakens, and it's just like seeing your worst enemy. He awakens to this guy, and he says, "No, don't steal my soul, you goddamn witch. I want nothing to do with you." And then they have to kind of put him immediately back to sleep in order to save him. But Mead had known a bit about Merc Mantis and kind of betrayed Bulric in that he didn't try to get him out of the room by any means, but he did manage to steal some drugs from Merc Mantis's medicine bag, which wasn't surprising, and then tries to escape the room because Mead he's just a self-sufficient type of guy, isn't thinking about many other people, but he's just trying to get away from this and wants to escape back into the wilderness of Cothein to get away from all of this responsibility. But Alver kind of uses his inspiring presence skill to cater to Mead's needs. So rather than say, "Hey, you're not going anywhere, I have something for you to do," which Mead, as we know, never responds to because he just wants to do whatever he wants to do, he kind of sides with Mead and says, "Yeah, have all the drink you want here, have all the food, do what you want, rampage through what we have. But if you want more, then you're going to need to go do something for me. And on top of that, if you like all of this stuff, well then get ready because the Latchards are coming and the life you knew, it will no longer be able to exist." So it rallies Mead a little bit, if for nothing else than for the mounds of wine that he will be given for completing this quest. But Alver sends him off on a tip about the Brothers of None out in Utermich. So Bulric will be healed and transported to the military camp that Alver was talking about at the tip of the Sudland Forest. You now have this smaller-sized army who will be equipped with better weapons once you fulfill your goal of intercepting Latchard shipments. Mead, your position and more of your details will be later on in the slide set. So we'll move on for now. Okay, now we got, as if our group here wasn't big enough. Oh, shit. I misspelled this. I can't even fix it. It's in preview. UL, not well. That was autocorrect on my computer. God damn it. All right, so it's Rocio, Ames, Nico, UL, and Shift. Shift, rather. Goddamn autocorrect. All right, so this story is pretty cool. and a lot is happening, filled with action. It opens with Ames and Nico picking up right at the end of the last arc that we had in Arc 5. And Ames has Rosio slung over his shoulders. They're escaping through this farmland west of the Trivium Binding, handing over Rosio as they're hopping fences with the Latchards shortly behind them. Both Ames and Nico are working to kind of dodge and block these arrows as they're escaping, but they come across the end of the farmland, which is marked by this wide but somewhat shallow river. But at the same time, it's slowing them down just enough that the Latchards can close in and fire some accurate arrows. And so Nico has Ames run through this river first with Rosio on his back. Nico, in the meantime, is using more of his telekinesis to start deflecting these arrows and shooting a couple off on his own to delay the Latchards more. And as Ames is kind of halfway through this river, Nico deflects one of these arrows with telekinesis, but unfortunately right in the direction of Ames and Rosio, and it pokes straight through him. And everyone kind of freezes for a minute, like watching what's going to happen. Then the Latchards shoot another arrow into Ames, and that's when Nico turns around and says, just panics, "Oh my god, what am I going to do?" But before he can even get to Ames, stranded in the middle of the river, dying, UL, who is definitely not well, heads out and just takes Rosio off Ames's back, which was a somewhat funny move. You know, if this is you see someone stranded in a river with arrows poking out of them, what do? Yeah, you might have to take the person, but you might try to grab the other guy who's now bleeding out and get him across the river. But UL doesn't even seem to acknowledge Ames and just kind of lifts Rosio off his back and takes him himself to the other side of the riverbank. Nico doesn't know what to do, but he runs out to Ames and tries to save Ames himself. And then UL turns back around and says to him, "I'm going to flood this river, whether you're in it or not. So are you coming, or are you going to stay there and try to help this guy, because you're not going to make it? The Latchards are right behind you." And so Nico doesn't know what to do, but he's pretty much forced at this point to drop Ames into the current and walk off with Nico. So Nico heads off, gets to the other side of the riverbank, and UL uses this connection to nature that he has to summon silverfish that come flowing the river and cut off the Latchards who are now trying to wade through the river themselves. Which gives Rosio and Nico the time that they need to run off into the foothills of the Sakari Mountains. So they get away, and Nico, just kind of being himself, is this contract killer who doesn't pay any mind to what his immediate mission is. He just heads off and says, "Yeah, thanks, weirdo guy," and heads off with Rosio, who's now conscious. So, in the foothills, they start arguing and bickering, and they're yelling loud enough to scare off a boar that this guy Schiff was hunting. And Schiff immediately freaks out on them, says, "These are reserved hunting grounds. What are you doing yelling through here? I've been trailing this boar." And he's a great animated character with a great sense of humor. And meanwhile, Nico and Rosio are just devastated by what happened with Ames. So they're not thinking anything about hunter's etiquette out in a wildlife reserve. So Schiff, through conversation, Schiff understands kind of what's going on and says, "Oh, whoa, wait, you're hiding as well? Oh, I'm out here hiding too. I was escaping a gambling debt in Morace. Why don't you come see my shelter, and I can hide you there for a short-term period." And just as they're about to leave, UL shows back up, scares the shit out of Schiff, and describes to the entire group that he's seen them in these visions and wants them to uh, go on this kind of spirit quest to see what their destiny is. He's very connected with spirits and the spirit world, and Nico is taken back and is kind of confused. But before they can really decide what to do with UL, the Latchards start to catch up. Schiff starts pushing everyone up into the foothills and saying, "Hey, let's go. Let's figure this out later," and brings them up to his hideaway. So that's where you guys will end up. And most importantly, Ames has died. Rest in peace, homie. You will be missed, but remember, anytime we have a character that dies, feel free to create a new character and re-enter our story. Can't wait to see what you guys got coming up with next. All right, Sand Maggot and Wretch. Two new characters here, both very interesting. On one hand, we have Sand Maggot, who is our first openly antagonist player, right? I was kind of excited for this because finally we have a human-controlled antagonist that can kind of directly attack other players and add some mix in some variety and some violence into the story. And we start out in the right place for him because he is with the Latchard army, and they have recently captured not only Morace, but also captured this deserter Wretch, who was using the military as an option to get through the rift and get into safe territory, kind of running from his past. So Wretch is immediately thrown into this pit, this ceremonial pit where after a win in the Latchard army, they dig this pit, they tie the blowhole of a blood hux, and send in all the prisoners of war. And the idea is the celebration continues until the blood hux kills all the prisoners, which is what usually happens, or continues and ends when a prisoner kills the Bloodhawks. And so they were all surprised to see Wretch get himself together and actually put up a good fight with this Bloodhawks. So Wretch is thrown in. We see a little bit of fire magism as he takes this bushel and lights it on fire and swipes it across the Bloodhux's eyes as he has this athletic dive over the top of the Bloodhux that is rushing him. And then we see him just go kind of back up against the wall. Maggot is kind of disappointed. He wants to see a good fight, but it looks like Wretch has given up. And the Bloodhux charges in just to kind of smash Wretch. And last minute, Wretch tucks down and it exposes a big sheet of rock that was sticking out from the side of the pit that was dug that the Bloodhux then ran into and basically knocked itself unconscious. So against all odds, he defeats the Bloodhux and earns his release. Maggot is now kind of interested in this guy. Like, that was, not only did he show off fire magism, which is generally more accepted among Latchards, but also some serious athleticism. So Maggot calls for Wretch to be brought to his tent, and that's where that story ended. Now, one important thing I forgot about Maggot is that he has this high up position in the Latchard forces, and that is because he himself is a dirty kind of mercenary that will do just about anything for coin. And so when the Latchards got word of him, they said, okay, this guy is a Cothein, he knows the lands, let's recruit him. And since then, he was working as an intelligence officer for them as they marched on to Morace. So Wretch is a prisoner. You're in Sand Maggot's tent, and Sand Maggot is with the Latchard army now based in Morace, the fallen Morace. Okay. Cothein, Nyx, Valiant, Maximus. This is a really cool group to see. Great, and there are my notifications. Yeah, we'll take a drink for that. Cheers. So now, this group is our first all new character group. I think these guys had gotten together and talked some plans of what they wanted to do, but really interesting part of this group, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but they have this mix of characters that basically represent the four corners of Cothein. You have Southerner, two people from the Midlands, and then a Northerner, all mixed together, and they've been traveling the Sakari Desert looking for a blade called the Reaver's Blade. This is a blade that they all knew a little bit about, but Valiant is really after because he wants to claim the weapon of the Dark God and reclaim his father's soul. So Nyx's parents had some information on this blade in the first place and its whereabouts, and they'd been traveling the Sakari Desert to find no success yet, but they end up in this place called Norlet Pass. Cothein, who is the Southerner, knows his way around the desert pretty well and brings them to this place for the night to kind of restock on goods and get a good night's sleep. So Valiant and Nyx kind of team up and say, listen, if we're in town for the night, we're getting all the pleasure out of this we can. We're headed to the brothel. It kind of bugs Maximus, who wants to kind of still be the leader of the group, and Nyx and Valiant head off. So Maximus doesn't exactly know what to do, but decides, it's screw it, I'll head off with them if that's where they're going and figure this out later. While Cothein keeps to the grind and heads over to the bar or the tavern where he's going to talk to some of the people to get leads on the Reaver, which isn't a bad idea considering Norlet Pass is kind of this drifter's town with a really eclectic group of travelers. So he heads there, and he's kind of asking around, and some people are like, no, I don't know anything about that. Others are straight up insulted, being asked about it because for some reason it's a sensitive subject around there. And then there's this one cobbler who is a resident to Norlet Pass that says, yeah, I got some information for you. He describes some of the things that Nyx's parents had described to them, some of the information they already had, but says he has more information waiting for this group back in his shop. So Cothein heads off with this guy who is visibly drunk, and he leads him into his shop, and as soon as he gets in there, Cothein gets a little bit suspicious because he blows out the one candle and then tells him to come inspect this map that is really just an empty piece of parchment. And as he does, Cothein is looking down, and two other men sneak into the tent, and one puts a wire around his neck and starts choking him out. Cothein displays some of his abilities. He has a good control over the wind and conjures this wind that to try to escape the grasp of his attacker, which he does. However, the cobbler gets to him with a hammer before that and kind of knocks him to the ground. And as he is struggling to get up, the second kind of guy who was there to jump him heads in with a killing blow, and right then we have Maximus come out of nowhere and chop off the dude's hand carrying the hammer, and as he's striking it and as he goes down, he realizes that half his arm's missing. So then he comes through with a great save. He's a master swordsman and displays his skills well, while Cothein blows the cobbler out of the tent completely using the wind, and while Maximus finishes the two remaining attackers. So then Cothein, of course, goes to investigate where the cobbler has gone, and he's escaped the grasp of Cothein and Maximus, but the town is still quiet at least. None of the guards caught on, at least not yet. So when they're out, Maximus kind of jokes with Cothein, like, maybe you should be carrying a sword so you can save yourself, a real man's weapon. But they did get a solid lead out of this on the Reaver in the position. Please stop texting me, god damn it. And that fits Nyx's parents' description, so they have a direction to travel now. Cothein has some minor injuries, taking a couple blows of the hammer and nearly passing out from getting choked out. And if they decide to stay in Norlet Pass, keep in mind that the cobbler is missing, and you might face being turned into the guards there. Okay. Great group. Excited to see where you guys are going next and display more of the abilities on this team because, as I said before, it's a great mix. Now we have probably more interesting developments in Cothein's central story here, as we have Paul, Letherain, and then they are joined by Resk later on. But this group was left at the Rift Conduit. Paul had begun losing his mind as Letherain was trying to investigate and understand this illusion of a room that they were under. And she starts going down to the center of the conduit where there's a gear with a handle, a crank handle around it, and she begins to spin it. And as she does, these staircases come up and fold over the room as if it were a gyroscope. And as that happens, Paul is kind of gripping the staircase as it's moving around, and he just loses his mind. And so Letherain goes to save him, and as she does, Paul really gets up and starts heading down to the center of the conduit himself, claiming this place is madness, it's cursed, we must break it to escape it. And at that time, Resk rides in. Resk has an interesting background. I would say go check out his character bio when you get a second, but he's been in the Sand Snake tunnels quite a bit, which is a very dangerous place, but he is this super soldier that was made by the Atran military at the tail end of a war and now really doesn't have a place to go that the military is no longer fighting. So instead, Resk had taken a job as a sand snake wrangler in the tunnels as Atroprog tries to again get control of its underground. So he's kind of slaughtering these sand snakes with kind of heroic feats. He rides in on the back of one and drives down the killing blow. But we're not sure what his involvement is yet, but he seems to have some understanding that the Soul Conduit was there. Maybe he had seen Paul and Letherain venture into the temple in the first place. But anyway, he now catches up with them and sees Paul trying to destroy the gear mechanism at the center of the conduit. So he rushes in and says, "Don't break it, don't break it, what are you doing, stop." And as he does, Paul breaks the center mechanism. The staircase gyroscopic casing type thing starts spinning out of control. Paul is sent off further into his madness, and Resk tries to save Letherain by gripping her to the staircase under the huge G-force from the spinning of the stairs. And they're left kind of on a cliffhanger in this episode. All three are lost. What I can tell you is where to go, is kind of where you'll be starting next. So Paul is lost in the madness of his own mind as he's whipped into the endless room. But Letherain and Resk are kind of together, are holding on to each other. And Letherain, for some reason, has some sight or at least feeling of that they're going to be okay. And she tells Resk, "Don't worry, relax and let go." And Resk does, whether he meant to intentionally or not, and they whip off into the blackness of the room as well. But we're pulling a complete interstellar here. Remember that this room has some connection to the rifts and some connection to a powerful magism. So Letherain and Resk in Arc 7 will be washed up at the shores of the Shattered Isles, okay? So that's all you need to know. More will be explained as this is a developing story and I don't want to ruin too much, but that's where you can expect to be. Okay. Hit me up with any more questions, by the way, if any of this wasn't clear. And that goes for anyone, not just the last group. Okay, Randy and Nebu. Two fun characters to write. These two, I don't think intentionally wrote together at all. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Randy is an illusion magifist that was looking to be part of some heist, while Nebu was escaping a heist as well. So it only made sense to put them together. And Randy is somewhat young, but what we do know about him is that he was one of the younger members in the Brothers of None. he has since that group has disbanded, he has kind of gotten these other thieves with him that he is somewhat unhappy with. But Nebu is this kind of deceiver that is very good at disguises and dressing as other people and infiltrating scenarios, whatever it be. And he was sent out on a mission to, in an elaborate scheme, to retrieve a bedroom key, deliver it to Randy, and then Randy would go and steal what is known as the Spider's Eye. And the Spider's Eye is rumored to have this powerful effect of being a catalyst to magism. Now, whether it's true or not, Randy really didn't concern himself with it, but what he does know is that it's valuable. So he steals this thing. Him and Nebu kind of are sent off in a comical escape from this Duchess's mansion. They escape through the back garden, away from the guards, and just when they think they're in the clear of the fence of the garden, they drop down into the haystack where they had planned for their men to have it, but their men were already outed by the guards, and they are captured. However, all of a sudden, the dirt of the road starts whipping up into a frenzy, almost a tornado. Randy and Nebu took this as a sign of, okay, let's get out of here, escape and go to the outer city limits, where they are actually met by a familiar face, being Sir Mead. So we knew that Mead previously in the episode was tipped off to some of the other members of the Brothers of None. We just didn't know exactly who it would be, and now here we are, following through with Alvar's lead, and the two meet up. So Mead is going to explain to Randy what the situation is, what Alvar wanted. As far as what you guys decide to do next is completely up to you, but you have the Spider's Eye as an item now, and you are with Sir Mead, who has every intention of returning you to Alvar at the North Sudland Forest camp. So that's where we ended our story. I think it's a good setup for kind of the next 2 episodes, which are going to lead us into the climax of the Cothein Season 1 story. It's going to be a lot of fun. These new characters, it was hard at first. It was really weird at first to think, how are these guys going to fit into what we already have? But I think it came together really well. You guys did an awesome job with your entries. As far as who you wanted to join, how you will join them, and most importantly, and I meant to tell you this, but you guys just did it on your own, is what can you offer to these new groups of people? And it was really clear, it was really easy for me to write, and I'm glad to have everyone on board. I hope you guys are as excited for 7 now. The great part about this is we've got these new introductions out of the way, so we can get right into your character development and right into your purpose in our central story, which will become very clear in 7 and as we move forward. So thank you for tuning in. We're going to cut it off there. I'm going to get back to my little vacation time here before my job starts. Fun employment is the best. Got the wedding tomorrow. So the content machine that I've been over the past week is now coming to a close. We're going to open submissions probably either Sunday or Monday, Memorial Day. Nice little holiday for us Americans. Fuck everyone else. And we'll get submissions out there for you guys to decide what you want to do next. Super excited. Can't wait to see what you guys have, and catch you on the flip side. Take it easy.